And thank you all for joining me this morning. And thanks to the government of Morocco, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund for hosting the meetings. I've seen firsthand the impressive progress that Morocco is making to recover from the devastating impact of last month's earthquake. The decision to proceed in Marrakesh is a testament to the resilience of the Moroccan people. The United States is committed to supporting the government of Morocco's recovery efforts as Morocco works to provide immediate, life-saving humanitarian assistance to those in need. These are also the first annual meetings in Africa in 50 years. It's fitting we're here, since Africa will shape the future of the global economy. Before highlighting priorities for this week, I want to also address the horrific attack by Hamas terrorists from Gaza this past Saturday. The United States condemns the attack in the strongest possible terms and stands resolutely with the people of Israel. Turning to our priorities here in Marrakesh, I'll start with the global macroeconomy. I'm very glad that some of the pessimism expressed when we met last year remains unwarranted. The global economy continues to be in a better place than many thought it might be. Projections for global growth are roughly the same as in July, and the IMF expects global inflation to continue to fall. And while some countries continue to experience slowing growth, we do not see signs of broad spillovers destabilizing the global economy. But we, of course, continue to closely monitor downside risks to the economic outlook. In the United States, we've had an historically strong recovery driven by the Biden administration's economic plan. Unemployment is now at 3.8%, and inflation has declined considerably. We're also making long-term investments. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act are building America's economic strength. And the impact will be felt far beyond the United States. As one example, the Inflation Reduction Act's massive investments in clean energy will help address the global challenge of climate change, which is rightly high on the agenda this week. As we navigate risks to the global economy, we see Russia's war against Ukraine as a major headwind and an affront to our values and to international law and the principle of territorial integrity. The Biden administration is committed to supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. Our actions matter for the Ukrainian people, for our own national security interests, and for the values we share with our allies and partners. And we're sharing the burden with these allies and partners who have provided Ukraine with robust economic assistance and are similarly focused on ensuring accountability. Ukraine's IMF program is also key to both delivering macroeconomic stability and advancing reforms. Looking ahead, I want to be clear that we cannot allow our support to Ukraine to be interrupted. Our allies and the Ukrainian people can rest assured that the Biden administration, with the support of a bipartisan majority of the U.S. Congress and the American people, will work so that Ukraine receives the assistance it needs to win this war. We also continue to work to mitigate the other impacts of the war, including on food security, especially since Russia's cruel withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And we remain focused on working with the global coalition to deprive Russia of the funding it needs to wage this unjust war. We've put in place a novel price cap policy, which has significantly reduced Russian revenue over the last 10 months while promoting stable energy markets. Global energy prices have been largely unchanged, while Russia has had to either sell oil at a significant discount or spend huge amounts on its alternative ecosystem. I also support harnessing windfall proceeds from Russian sovereign assets immobilized in particular clearinghouses and using the funds to support Ukraine. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine has caused untold human suffering and economic damage. We must continue to impose severe and increasing costs on Russia and continue efforts to ensure Russia pays for the damage it's caused. Our focus on the global economy and on addressing global challenges, including through the international financial system, also continues to shape our approach toward our relationship with China. As we protect our national security interests, we seek a healthy economic relationship that benefits both sides and cooperation on debt restructuring and global challenges like climate change. Following my visit to China this summer, we announced economic and financial working groups, a further significant step in continuing to deepen our communication. And I look forward to meeting with People's Bank of China Governor Pan Gongcheng to discuss macroeconomic and financial issues while in Marrakesh this week, including how Treasury and the PBOC take forward the financial working group. Throughout the week, we will also be focused on advancing our work to evolve the multilateral development banks. These annual meetings mark the one-year anniversary of my call to evolve the MDBs, and we've accomplished a tremendous amount in just 1 year, including forming a broad coalition to take the evolution agenda forward. But there's much more to be done, and we need to keep the momentum going in conversations this week and when we return home. Notably, our evolution agenda doesn't stop at the World Bank. It extends to the regional development banks and to how the MDBs work as a system. Turning to our efforts to strengthen the IMF, we're seeking to reach consensus on an equiproportional increase in quota resources to put the IMF's finances on sound footing and keep it at the center of the global financial safety net. We're also exploring ways to give more voice to developing countries through changes in the management and board structure of the fund. Finally, our focus on the international financial system also includes pushing for changes to make the debt architecture work better and faster, which is crucial for development and financial stability. Well, thank you for joining me this morning, and I look forward to a productive week ahead.
Alan Rappaport, New York Times.
Thanks very much for taking my question. Secretary Yellen, I wanted to ask, do you think that the war in the Middle East has the potential to inflame inflationary pressures around the world? And what measures are you considering to contain oil prices if the conflict constrains supplies?
Well, let me say that at this stage, we're focused on human beings that have been affected by these barbaric attacks on Israel and the suffering that it's caused. As President Biden said, we stand firmly behind Israel and are there to support Israel in any way that's necessary. And while we're monitoring potential economic impacts from the crisis, I'm not really thinking of that as a major likely driver of the global economic outlook. So we will see what impact it has. Thus far, I don't think we've seen anything suggesting it will be very significant, but of course we're monitoring monitoring economic impacts as well.
Colby Smith, FT.
Thank you so much for taking our questions. To what extent is the U.S. looking to tighten the enforcement of oil sanctions on Iran in light of the Hamas attacks? And are there other avenues the administration is considering to make it harder for terrorist organizations like Hamas to access financing?
Well, we have not in any way relaxed our sanctions on Iranian oil, and we have sanctions on Hamas, on Hezbollah. This is something we have been constantly looking at and using information that comes available to tighten sanctions. We will continue to do that. So I don't have anything new to announce, just that these are areas we have long recognized are deserving of constant attention with respect to our sanctions, and we've been vigilant about that.
Andy Duran with the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, Secretary Yellen. Just on that point, though, there's been a lot of attention drawn to the $6 billion in Iranian oil proceeds that have been unfrozen under obviously specific terms. If the U.S. government finds that Iran was, directly involved in this attack by Hamas, would that money be refrozen potentially, or just what's the outlook on those funds in particular going forward?
Well, these are funds that are sitting in Qatar that were made available purely for humanitarian purposes, and the funds have not been touched. I wouldn't take anything off the table in terms of future possible actions, but I certainly don't want to get ahead of where we are on that.
Andrea Shalal with Reuters.
Secretary, in the run-up to what's happened now, there's a lot of discussion about a soft landing. But we've heard from the IMF and the World Bank about the variety of risks that are facing the global economy. Are you concerned that there's not enough attention being paid to these sort of outlier risks that we're not expecting? And what do you see now in terms of, not just the impact on inflation, but also the impact on kind of the global stability, right? Through all of these crises. And then just very quickly on your meeting with the Chinese, you mentioned in your remarks that you are looking for cooperation from China on debt issues and other, structural issues. But with all of the visits that you've made and that other U.S. officials have made to China, we're still not really seeing any progress on the debt issue. And it looks like the question of the equiproportional increase in the quotas is still up in the air. Give us an update.
So starting with the soft landing, look, I still see as the base case for the United States a so-called soft landing. Our labor market is obviously very resilient, continues to perform very well. We have low unemployment, continue with solid job creation, wage pressures that could have been a concern with respect to inflation, we're seeing diminish, and inflation itself is diminishing. And so I continue to see as the base case, the United States is doing well and is on a good path. But are there risks to this outcome? Of course there are, and global shocks are among them. We've long cited fallout from Russia's brutal attack against Ukraine as a factor harming the global outlook, imposing serious costs on low-income countries, boosting oil and food prices. We're obviously through many different using tools trying to address that. And of course, the situation in Israel poses, additional concerns. So I'm not saying that a soft landing is an absolutely sure thing, but I do continue to think it's the most likely path. You asked about my meeting with the PBOC governor. I do think we're making meaningful progress in deepening our communications, establishing a contact with respect to economic and financial issues of concern to both of our nations on a regular basis. We expect to have a good channel to discuss debt issues with them. And although progress has been slow and certainly needs to be improved, and it's something we've long focused on and continue to focus on, we have seen some meaningful progress in particular cases. China has come to the table, for example, in the case of debt relief for Zambia. And so I am hopeful that more progress can be made. And I do think, going back to President Biden's meeting with President Xi in Bali, there was clear recognition that the world economy, the global economy depends on China and the United States working together to solve problems of global concern where we both have a role. This is something we both recognize is necessary and desirable. And certainly climate change is an area where we need to work together to cooperate to address it. And I would say the United States for several years now has co-chaired a G20 working group on sustainable finance. We've worked very constructively with representatives from the PBOC to advance a common agenda that relates to climate change. And so I definitely see a potential for us to deepen our work together, and I'm optimistic about that.
And Chris Condon from Bloomberg for the final question.
Thank you. Good morning, Secretary Yellen. Here in Morocco this week, you are making some important financial pledges on behalf of the U.S. You've mentioned aid to Ukraine, increased support for the World Bank, and you're asking other countries to follow suit. But there are serious doubts about the Biden administration's ability to get Congress to back those pledges. And there is increasing political dysfunction in Washington. How concerned are you that that dysfunction is undermining your credibility here? And what specifically are you hearing back from your counterparts? Are they concerned? Are they anxious about what's happening in Washington? Thank you.
So what I'd say about this is that funding for Ukraine, both military and economic support, direct budget support, along with resources for Israel, are absolute top priorities of the Biden administration. We have made that completely clear to Congress, and we believe there is substantial bipartisan support. So, we're going to leave it to members of Congress to figure out how to move forward on this once a speaker is in place. And I can't tell you precisely what the timetable is for getting this done, but I do believe this will happen, and it is an absolute top priority and commitment of the Biden administration to get this done. And we believe the support for doing this is there. The World Bank, our supplementary funding request also includes about $2.25 billion resources that would go to the World Bank, that part of it would take the form of guarantees, loan guarantees, would enable another roughly $27 billion of lending to address global challenges, as well as some additional support for IDA for the lowest income countries. And we are asking other countries, and I expect in the meetings that I have this week, I will reach out to other countries and ask them to join us in providing immediate concessional finance to the World Bank. And we're receiving some positive responses. And again, this is a very important priority for the president, and I hope and believe it will be possible to get this done.